Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the invitation to the members of the Finance Committee. So I'm here today at your invitation to answer any questions you have following publication of the so-called Uber files last July. As you know, I was previously a senior executive at Uber in charge of public policy. And my main role was to convince governments and regulators in nearly 50 countries around Europe, Africa, and the Middle East to change the law to allow Uber to operate and be successful. So I am the source of these files, which came to light through an investigation that was jointly led by the Guardian newspaper and the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. And that was over 180 journalists from 44 media organizations in 29 countries. And they researched through more than 124,000 documents to reveal how Uber bullied its way into cities around the world, including here in the Netherlands. The files span a period from 2013 to 2017, and they unveil Uber's aggressive expansion across the world. And they showed that we lobbied, just in this region alone, more than 1,800 politicians and officials in 29 countries, as well as many senior representatives of the European Union. The data shows that the company had easy access to prominent leaders, the company influenced governments, and the company avoided taxes. So why did I release this information? Why did I sacrifice my reputation, my career, my health, and countless friendships by providing the data to the media and assisting them with their work? Because, members of the Finance Committee, ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just about Uber. It's about the systemic failures that helped a company like Uber to take advantage of loopholes to get what they wanted to the detriment of drivers, of taxpayers, and even democracy itself. The reason I'm here today is to try and help prevent this from happening again. Now, I've been at the nexus of the worlds of business and government for almost 30 years. I was trusted by companies and their shareholders to convince legislators, regulators, and governments to propose, enact, and revise laws and regulations in the interests of private enterprise. And I'm proud of that career and of much of the work I accomplished. But in the minds of some, there's something opaque and underhanded about lobbying. And being a lobbyist is not always perceived as a noble thing to be. According to the dictionary, a lobbyist is a person seeking to influence legislators on a particular issue. And that's essentially what I did. And I continue to believe that skilled, ethical, regulated lobbying is a fundamental component of an effective democracy. It ensures that politicians like yourselves are well informed and can make decisions that benefit us all, companies and people alike. For this to happen, though, there have to be robust rules governing the interaction between the private enterprise and the representatives of the state, both politicians and civil servants. Those rules must be sensible, fair, non-discriminatory, and as beneficial to the public good as possible. What the revelations of the Uber files show is that the rules governing this interaction have broken down. They were not fit for purpose when Uber knowingly was breaking laws around the world. They remain unfit for purpose today. Uber bullied its way into countries and disregarded the law because it faced little or no real resistance. And I'm alarmed by the continued inability of the state, here and in many democratic nations around the world, to resist and refute unethical, immoral, private sector interests motivated not by the public good, but by profit and pure greed. So if you accept that lobbying per se is not the problem, then what are the practices that bring lobbyists into disrepute and allow companies to drive a coach and four horses through the law, as Uber did in those days? Uber's methods duped politicians and the public alike with politicians often saber-rattling in the media, but showing far greater interest and cooperation in our private meetings. It was no exception here in the Netherlands, where the highest levels of government, having eagerly provided Uber with an immoral, unethical tax status, provided encouragement in our private meetings while instructing the Public Prosecution Service and other enforcement authorities to raid our offices, scare honest Uber drivers, and charge executives with criminal acts. It was very odd to witness the schizophrenic attitude of many governments, telling us directly and via the media that we were breaking the law, while at the same time trying to find quick fixes to let us into the market and hopefully generate tax revenues and create jobs and wealth. I say this respectfully, but I suppose there was a certain logic here in the Netherlands that the government would do everything in its power to protect and defend Uber, given the tailor-made tax arrangement that the Dutch state awarded in 2013. I should perhaps remind you that Amsterdam served as the base for Uber's rogue operations around the world. By bending over backwards to ensure that Uber located its international headquarters here in the Netherlands, the government and many state agencies often turned a blind eye to the harm that this Dutch-based company was causing elsewhere. The data that I provided to the investigative journalists shows how the Dutch state operated as a defender of Uber, routinely fending off concerns of other EU member states and advocating Uber's interests in meetings in Brussels, while here at home, the state harassed, fined, and humiliated citizens who were recruited by Uber to drive in Amsterdam, in Rotterdam, and here in Den Haag. Democracies cannot function when those elected to serve the people engage in practices that are hidden from the public view and that are withheld from the public record. Despite many freedom of information requests, the Dutch government still refuses to reveal the sweet tax deal it gave to Uber, stating that information related to tax matters is confidential. Now, while this may be convenient for a government in the short term, in the long term, it will undermine people's trust in politicians and set the stage for history to repeat itself. It's not my place to lecture Dutch elected representatives. My role is to simply share what I know in the hopes that this knowledge will help lead to a solution. A fix that ensures our democracy is strengthened, not harmed by lobbying. I'm resolute in my conviction that the public interest is served wherever and whenever it is revealed that the common good was potentially sacrificed to the benefit of the powerful. And in those days, Uber was very powerful. We had unlimited, disproportionate financial resources and political influence. Like many big tech companies then and since, we were too big and too powerful for any one country to take on alone. That power was enhanced by weak transparency rules that allowed some politicians to hide their interactions with us. This is not just a Dutch or European problem, it's a global problem. Money continues to buy access and influence. I blew the whistle because I realized that I helped sell people a lie. And if people like me don't speak out, then there's no hope for meaningful reform. Unless politicians like you here in the Netherlands and around the world and in each and every EU institution take drastic action to establish ethics rules that prevent the type of behavior we will discuss today, then our democracy has as much to fear from self-inflicted wounds as it does from despots and autocrats with tanks and bombs. I would encourage the Finance Committee to push for regulation of lobbying that's truly fit for purpose here and at the EU level. And if you find what you read in the Uber files to be unacceptable, then please remember that such practices were made possible by a combination of ruthless greed and state failure, and that many companies before and since have succeeded in subverting democracy and the rule of law, again, with little effective resistance. We all win when we have robust rules. We all lose when those rules favor the powerful over the powerless. If I may add two brief additional points before I take your questions. First, in the case of Uber, drivers were directly harmed by the lax rules that allow Uber to lobby in secret, and that led to millions of platform workers in Europe been denied minimum social protections and basic human decency. I would encourage this committee and this Parliament to ensure that the Dutch government supports the draft European directive on platform workers that was adopted by the European Parliament, and to resist attempts by France and others to put the profit of companies like Uber before the rights of Dutch workers. Ladies and gentlemen, Uber trampled over European labour laws from its Dutch base, and it continues to do so today. Surely that must be a source of shame and embarrassment for those in this House who believe that basic social protections for workers are essential. How far will one government go to prioritise the race for foreign direct investment? The second of the 2 points is that since July 11th, 2022, I'm no longer a lobbyist. I have a new label, that of whistleblower, klokkenluider, which for some also carries a negative connotation. Whatever your position, it's imperative that we protect those who risk everything to come forward with public interest information. The European Union Directive on Whistleblower Protection, that has finally, very late, been implemented here in the Netherlands. It's a start, but there is so much more that we can and must do to assure that those who want to speak up can do so without fear of retaliation. I was lucky. I had incredible support from the Signals Network, a non-profit organization that helped support me in my whistleblowing journey. Every whistleblower should know that this support exists, and every government should welcome this support for its whistleblowers. Nothing is more important to the future of democracy than shining a light on those who put our democracies in danger, those whose actions and whose greed weaken the democracies from the inside. Shining that light in large part depends on the courage of those who are willing to come forward and share what they know. We should do everything in our power to protect them when they do come forward. Thank you all.
Thanks for your clear introduction.